We start off this chapter at a local tavern in the area. After forcing the old man to make his item, we find Damien and Chippy stuffing their faces with food, happy and satisfied after the old man had finally made the item for them, while being on his knees and trembling with fear. As he picked his teeth, even though it took quite a while to make the item, Damien was glad that at least, he got his money's worth. But as he was enjoying his meal, he overheard two other customers in the tavern talking about a recent rumor spreading around the town. They were talking about someone being an artisan murderer. According to the customers, the artisan murderer was a bastard who hides his face using the Brotherhood robe set, and goes sound to all types of mage towers. Those who have suffered at this villain's hands include Sir Renos, the old man, and Sir Glint. Hearing the details of the rumor, Damien started to cough violently, catching the attention of the other customers. Looking at our boy, they thought that it was a bad sign that since he was quite young, he was already having problems with his body. The other customer even warns him to be careful too since they haven't seen him around before. As they were afraid that Damien might become the next victim of the artisan murderer. But our boy, all panicky and nervous with sweat dripping down his face, assures them that he is going to be fine and blesses them to be safe too. Soon after, Damien went on to leave the tavern, saying goodbye to the other customers. As they leave the tavern, Chippy asks him if the rumors were about them, which Damien believed that it was. Even though he was getting a bad reputation, Damien was fine with it. After all, he got everything he needed from this place. Gathering all of these items was the result of squeezing the masters of the countless mage towers dry. Seeing that he had done everything he needed in this place, Damien switches his outfit to the wolf totemic set, and proceeds to move on to his next location. Here's a bit of information on Damien's new outfit. It's called the wolf totemic set. A long time ago, the heir of the Mbadu tribe, Lakam Ya Dume, spent his whole life with the wolf he raised. When he united 46 tribes, people called him the incarnation of the silver wolf. Its rank is hero. Wearing a 2 set, Vengeful Spirit's arrow will change into the form of a wolf and, upon hitting the mark, will go into the abnormal status of blood loss. Wearing a 4 set, upon attacking, Vengeful Spirit's arrow will automatically activate and be divided with a 50% chance. Automatically activated Vengeful Spirit's arrows will not consume any mana. Wearing a 6 set, Vengeful Spirit's arrows' continued magic damage will increase from 30 seconds to 300 seconds, and enduring magic damage will be immediately given. Looking at the options given by the new set of clothes, Damien could only call it crazy. After all, he did spend a huge amount of money on it with the masters. He had used around 100 million won in real life, so the equipment should be this good. He needed to spend this much, because the next place he was going to require it if he wanted to make his way through the central part. But before he could move on, Damien looked at his hand. Thinking that it would be pretty nice if he could get rid of the curse before that. Seeing talk about it, Chippy wonders if Damien was talking about the thing that was sticking to his body. It is. Damien's master did mention it before. Revenge was important, but Damien had another important goal to achieve too. The curse Damien was talking about was referring to the one he got after regressing back to 10 years in the past, which will reveal the identity of the OVO system. If it wasn't for this curse, Damien wouldn't have felt so much pressure in raising his stats like this. The curse acted like a timer, forcing Damien to enter the game within a few days, or risk dying as a result. To Damien, the system was the biggest mystery right now. He had been tracking Aleister Crowley, who seems suspicious, as well as the crucifix's Dawn for now, but he shakes his head, reminding himself to take things one step at a time. And that naturally, the results would show themselves. The scene then changes to find our boys in a completely new place, filled with mountains with jagged and sharp tops. Chippy was complaining to Damien, asking him how much further they had to go. Shouting that it was almost dark already, Damien continued to look around, convinced that the place he was looking for was around here somewhere. As he continues to search, the sounds of something whispering in the air catches their attention. Chippy started to panic overhearing it, slapping Damien's face continuously, telling him that a ghost was going to come out. But our boy ignores the little bird's complaints, and heads deeper into the darkness of the forest. He even teases Chippy that he was a ghost too, but our little birdie refutes that statement, saying that he was a chick spirit. As he passes through the tall grass, Damien continues to assure Chippy that the thing he was looking for was close by now. Walking further down, he spots an opening in the ground, lighted by something. Thanks to the sixth sense skill and his experiences before regressing, Damien was finally able to find it. Descending into the opening, this was a place that has been disconnected from the world, because players couldn't even set up a common warp gate here. And this was a place where you might lose your life upon entering if they weren't strong enough to handle what was inside. After all, this was a place where ancient monsters live eternally, transcending species and age, simply for one goal. Upon entering this new location, Damien shouts at the top of lungs, his voice echoing through the chambers, asking if there was anyone here. It turns out that his current location is known as Uldweir's Furnace. A place where lava was flowing like pillars. Chippy started to complain to Damien about the new place. He could feel that he was going to become like chicken soup, but at the same time, he could also feel that the mana here was super clean. What Chippy felt wasn't wrong. Damien knew that this place was blessed, and it's rich in mana, enough to be called a ley line. Walking around the place, Damien still couldn't see anyone, plus it was super quiet for some reason. But as he ventured deeper, Damien could pick up on some noises coming from a certain direction. He walked towards the source of it, the moment he was close to it. Another person spoke out, asking who was there. As a tall looming shadow covers Damien, our boy looks up at who it belongs to. With the words, "Sir Lexer?" a massive orc monster appears before our boys, eyes gleaming bright red, asking who Damien is. Its ferocious aura could be seen lingering all over its body in a red hue. The orc was called Lexer, and he was curious about how Damien knew his name. Damien couldn't respond at all. His entire body was covered with sweat due to the immense aura that Lexer was giving off. As expected, his overpowering presence is as incredible as ever. If Damien makes the wrong move, something bad is going to happen to him. He immediately bows his head before the great Lexer, acknowledging that his reputation far precedes him, as he was the one who led the Red Hammer Alliance. The sole heir of the incredible warrior, Sir Rocktar, and the owner of the immortal King Hammer. Hearing about his reputation, Lexer admits to being that guy at one point in time. But he also knew that it was from several hundred years ago. Which made him impressed, as he sees Damien as quite a knowledgeable human. In the orc world, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call Lexer a mythical hero. After the heavenly demon battle, he was the orc that defeated the rampant black dragon single-handedly. And after the great warrior Rocktar died to the black dragon, he received the immortal King Hammer, which had the power of the previous heroes within it. He had also united his species with the most outstanding power and charisma, to create the Red Hammer Alliance. His existence was akin to a god's among orcs. Lexer was him, but then Damien knew that he was also the one to dissolve the alliance, retire, and now spend the rest of his life here, in Uldweir's Furnace. Looking around, Damien was curious why he was alone here, as he was sure that there were supposed to be more people. Even though he was impressed that Damien knew who he was and his backstory, Lexer still couldn't believe that a human would have the balls to come to this place. Hearing the way he spoke, Damien needed to answer carefully so Lexer doesn't get angry, so instead, he tells Lexer that he has an offer. But that turns out to be the wrong move, as Lexer's eyes were now focused on him, glowing red with a slight tinge of anger as he asked Damien if he wanted to die. Our boy started to panic, wondering what made him say that all of a sudden. But it was useless. Lexer, in anger, shouts at Damien, angry over the fact that a human had come into this place and even had the balls to make a deal with him. He raises his mighty red hammer, ready to strike Damien down for saying he had an offer. All our boy could do in that moment was realize that he screwed up massively, and braced for impact, using his arms as a shield against the mighty orc's attack. But before Lexer could strike, two more voices appeared, with thunder and lightning. They were shouting and complaining about who was talking so loudly in this holy place, before calling Lexer a bastard orc. With the appearances of the blue and yellow lighting and thunder, Damien recognizes the voices behind them. Two more figures appear in the darkness of the cave. They were none other than the other two owners of Uldweir's Furnace. They had finally made their appearance. The first to make his appearance is the first king of Durin, the great dwarf kingdom below the mountain, Muradin Ratatosk II. He was the one that called Lexer a bastard and the owner of the blue lightning. He scolds him for swinging his heinous weapon around here. The second to make his appearance is the fairy king, who protected the land of fairies from the great evil, Balak Oberon Paraha of Royan, who was complaining about how they let an orc into this place, and yet, his arrogance has reached the sky. Damien immediately bows his head towards the other owners, as this was his opportunity, in order to survive. Muradin and Balak were amused by Damien's actions, curious about how he knew their names. Damien reveals that he had come to this place after hearing a story about Tubal Cain, Wayland and Vulcanus. Amongst the three of them, it was to determine who is the best blacksmith out of the three species. The three of them had taken part in a competition lasting for 1,000 years, deeming that whoever wins the competition will be considered the continent's greatest blacksmith. Haven't heard about the name Vulcanus for quite some time. Balak was curious if his name had already spread amongst the humans. Muradin picks a fight, claiming that his name was spoken first before the elf-man, which angers Balak. In the argument, Lexer joins in, calling them immature bastards for coming here since they had so much to do. Damien couldn't believe what he was seeing. These three were still as crazy as ever. He couldn't believe how they weren't tired from fighting here every day. But this was the reason Oldweir's furnace was a place where everyone wanted to find in his past life. Since a fight amongst these three could lead to the creation of a random craft item that has advanced abilities. Looking at how easily they were fighting, Damien realized that this was the reason why they had no social skills and were so ill-tempered. Balak snapped hard, raising his hammer, lightning all around. He declared that he was going to beat the small dwarf first. Seeing that this fight was going to be for real, the dwarf king raises his hammer as well, attempting to fight back, but in doing so, he smacks Lexer in the face. Which leaves both of them with a shocked expression on their faces. Lexer, with his nose bleeding, looks at them as dead meat. Since they wanted to die so badly, he was going to grant their wishes. Looking at how the fight was going, Damien realized that shit was about to hit the fan. This time, Lexer joins in the fight. The three heavyweights were now going for it all together. Seeing the major forces collide, this was something our boy couldn't handle, so he makes the wisest choice. He makes a run for safety. A smart choice he made, as the impact of the three bosses was enough to destroy the entire area they were in. After some time had passed, Lexer was the only one at the table talking with Damien about how he wanted to make them an offer, while Balak and Muradin were buried underneath the rubble of their fight. As he sat at the table with Lexer in front of him, Damien laughed and thought about how ridiculous this was. The orc in front of him was obviously much stronger than the other two. The story about them was that these three were tied together by one covenant. They bet their lives to serve the winner of the competition as an older brother. Thanks to that curse-like covenant, they can't die and keep repeating this ridiculous and tiring fight, all over and over again. Damien reveals to them that he knew about why they were staying here, which was because of the 1,000-year-long covenant. Lexer was surprised to see that Damien knew about that. Damien starts to search for something in his clothes, telling them that he had something to end their bet with. In front of Lexer, he takes out something which draws his attention. He questions Damien on what that red orb-like object was in his hand. Looking at it closely this time, Lexer finally realizes what it is. It turns out to be the flamelight, called the Eye of the Fire Dragon. He quickly took it away from Damien, wondering how someone like him came into possession of such a precious item. Damien proudly tells him that he had his ways. After all, he didn't get the nickname, Mage Tower Murderer, for nothing. In the middle of their chat, they were interrupted by Muradin, who appears in the dust cloud beside them, calling Damien a human without manners. Having recovered from their fight, Muradin and Balak dusts off the rubble from their bodies, complaining to Damien and Lexer about the phrase, elders first, and demanding that if such an item does exist, then Damien should be giving it to them first, as an offering. Upon hearing their complaints, Damien was actually prepared for this, revealing to the two other bosses that he had something to give them as well. He orders Chippy to enter his clothes and take out the items. Chippy returns, holding two items within his hands and presenting them as presents to the bosses. Balak takes the yellow one, calling it the World Tree's Tears. While Muradin took the blue item, knowing it as the Akrisha Hamoel document. Both the bosses were confused by how a human like Damien had obtained such precious items. Seeing how excited the three bosses were about the items given to them, Damien gives a high five to Chippy. After all, their plan had worked. Now the three bosses were hooked. After receiving the items, the bosses were curious about why Damien had given them such precious items. Damien explains to them, not only were they considered the greatest blacksmiths of their respective species, they had also left their legendary marks on the continent. He knows that they have been competing to find out who the best blacksmith is out of the three of them for thousands of years. But he poses them a question: didn't they find it strange that even though they had been fighting for hundreds of years, they have yet to come to a conclusion? From what Damien knew about them, after they had made items for a whole year, they would each rate the other person's work and then tally the score. Hearing about the way they did their work, Muradin was furious, thinking that Damien was mocking them. But he simply points out that their current way of doing things was the problem. He points out to them that each of them have different standards, and since they were competing with one another, why would they fairly assess each other's work in the first place? Upon hearing what Damien had to say, the three blacksmiths realized something. Lexer speaks out first, questioning the two seniors if this was why they always rate his work so low. Soon enough, a scolding match between the three blacksmiths breaks out, each of them blaming one another for their low scores after hundreds of years. Instead of using their weapons this round, the elderly were going for each other, barefisted. With a thunderous clap from Damien, he orders them to stop fighting as it wouldn't end their problem. Lexer then questions him on what they have to do, causing Damien to stand up and telling them that they finally had someone else here. He appoints himself a judge, and suggests that he be the one to judge their work fairly right now. But the elders still weren't convinced. They argue that they didn't know if Damien was going to be fair or if he had an assurance that he had good taste. So in order to appease their worries, Damien took out a huge sack, pouring out massive amounts of items on the table in front of them. The three blacksmiths were taken aback. Looking at each item, they were all for forging and all were high quality. Seeing how they were interested in them, Damien asks if they all agree that the ingredients were the same level. Balak was the first to agree with that, stating that the ingredients were all of the same rank. Happy with that, Damien announces that with the same amount of time and ingredients, he needed them to add one more additional condition. He pushes an idea to the blacksmiths, saying that someone using their items will make the standards clearer. So Damien pushes them to create equipment for him, and as the user, he will assess them as fairly as possible. His proposal was shocking to the blacksmiths as they all flinched upon hearing it. But our boy was confident in his proposal. Offering his hand, he questioned the elders about what they thought of his plan.
Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.